powers, the informal powers that come with this high-profile job, and the chief executive's opportunities to communicate directly with the public. The president sits at the top of a large pyramid of executive agencies and departments that assist in making foreign policy. If the president does not take time to manage the agencies, other individuals may seize the opportunity to interpret foreign policy in terms of their own interests and goals. In a sense, the president provides a check on the power of the executive agencies, and without the president's leadership, foreign policy can drift. President Ronald Reagan didn't pay a lot of attention to foreign affairs, and so staff members in the National Security Council began to make foreign policy themselves. The result was the Iran-Contra affair in the mid-1980s. The National Security Council, NSC, is part of the president's inner circle, the executive office of the president. It was created in 1947 by the National Security Act to advise the president on matters of foreign policy and is coordinated by the National Security Advisor. By law, the NSC includes the president, vice president, secretary of state, and secretary of defense. Additionally, the director of national intelligence, who is also the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, and the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of the commanders of the military services, sit as advisors to the NSC. Beyond this, presidents have wide discretion to decide what the NSC will look like and how they will use it by appointing other members and deciding how the council will function. In addition to the NSC, several executive departments and agencies play a critical role in foreign policy making. The Department of State is charged with managing foreign affairs. It is often considered to be first among equals in its position relative to the other departments because it was the first department established by the Constitution in 1789. The State Department is headed by the Secretary of State, who is part of the President's cabinet and fulfills a variety of foreign policy roles, including maintaining diplomatic and consular posts around the world, sending delegates and missions, groups of government officials, to a variety of international organization meetings, and negotiating treaties and executive agreements with other countries. Among the employees of the State Department are the Foreign Service officers, the most senior of which are the U.S. ambassadors. The second major department involved in foreign policy is the Department of Defense, headquartered in the Pentagon. The main job of this department is to manage American soldiers and their equipment in order to protect the United States. The Defense Department is headed by the Secretary of Defense, whose job in part is to advise the President on defense matters and who, it is important to note, is a civilian. The Joint Chiefs of Staff is part of the Defense Department. This group consists of the senior military officers of the Armed Forces, the Army and Air Force Chiefs of Staff, the Chief of Naval Operations, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, the Chief of the National Guard Bureau, the Chief of Space Operations, and a Vice Chair. The Chair is selected by the President. The Joint Chiefs of Staff advises the Secretary of Defense, although the Chair also may offer advice directly to the President and is responsible for managing the armed forces of the United States. Another executive actor in foreign policy making is the intelligence community, which comprises several government agencies and bureaus. This community's job is to collect, organize, and analyze information. Information can be gathered in a number of ways, from the mundane, such as reading foreign newspapers, to the more clandestine, for instance, spying both by human beings and through surveillance satellites. Until 2004, the community was coordinated by the Director of Central Intelligence, who is also the head of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. In the wake of many studies and hearings about the events leading up to September 11th, as well as current security concerns, President George W. Bush signed legislation that altered how the intelligence community is managed. The job of the Director of Central Intelligence was limited to directing the CIA. The job of coordinating the entire network of agencies now falls to the Director of National Intelligence. In addition to the State Department, the Defense Department, and the intelligence community, other departments have roles to play in foreign policy. For instance, the Treasury Department and the Commerce Department are concerned with America's foreign economic policy, and the Department of Agriculture is interested in promoting American agricultural products abroad. Congress. As we saw in Chapter 6, Congress has a variety of constitutional roles in making foreign policy, including the powers to make treaties, to declare war, and to appropriate money. But Congress faces obstacles in its efforts to play an active role in foreign policy. It must deal with the considerable powers of the president, for instance, and it is more oriented toward domestic than foreign affairs, given the ever-present imperative of re-election. Congressional organization also can hamper Congress's role in foreign policy. The fragmentation of Congress, the slow speed of deliberation, and the complex nature of many foreign issues can make it difficult for Congress to play a big role, particularly in fast-moving foreign events. The foreign policy tension between the president and Congress is illustrated by the complex issues surrounding the use of military force. The president is in charge of the armed forces, but only Congress can declare war. Presidents try to get around the power of Congress by committing troops to military actions that do not have the official status of a war, but this can infuriate legislators. Presidents have sent troops abroad without a formal declaration of war on a number of occasions, for example, to Korea, 1950, the Dominican Republic, 1965, Vietnam, 1965, Lebanon, 1982, Grenada, 1983, Panama, 1989, the Persian Gulf, 1990, Afghanistan, 2001, and Iraq, 2003. As the United States became more involved in the Vietnam War, however, Congress became increasingly unhappy with the president's role. When, in the early 1970s, public opinion against the war became increasingly vocal, Congress turned on the Commander-in-Chief, passing the War Powers Act of 1973 over President Richard Nixon's veto. The act includes the following provisions. The president must inform Congress of the introduction of forces into hostilities or situations where imminent involvement in hostilities is clearly indicated by the circumstances. Troop commitments by the president cannot extend past 60 days without specific congressional authorization. Anytime American forces become engaged in hostilities without a declaration of war or specific congressional authorization, Congress can direct the president to disengage such troops by a concurrent resolution of the two houses of Congress. The War Powers Act has not stopped presidents from using force abroad, however. Chief executives have largely sidestepped the act through a simple loophole. They don't make their reports to Congress exactly as the act requires, and therefore they never trigger the 60-day clock. They generally report consistent with but not pursuant to the act, a technicality that allows them to satisfy Congress's interest in being informed without tying their hands by starting the clock. Despite its difficulties in enforcing the War Powers Act, Congress has tried to play a fairly active role in foreign policy making, sometimes working with presidents and sometimes at odds with them. The calculation for Congress is fairly straightforward. Let presidents pursue risky military strategies. If they succeed, take credit for staying out of their way. If they fail, blame them for not consulting and for being imperial. Either way, Congress wins. How do we define a foreign policy problem? The actors we have just discussed work in a very distinctive political environment that helps them decide when a foreign situation constitutes a problem and when it should be acted on. Most foreign policy is either action to correct